Hello, welcome back to Crush'em TV. And to answer your first question, no, this is not a conspiracy theory video. No, this is not a fake video. This is true. This is real. And I know it's going to sound crazy, and you're going to shake your head and ask, what? What the hell? Why couldn't this have happened 20 years ago? That was the first thing I thought. Why couldn't this have happened when I was old enough to, or young enough to join? The article, which is found on RT.com, the American version, not the Russian version, is that the U.S. is set to create a space course through an overhaul of the Air Force. And as you read through this, you will find out it is in fact true. This is actually not a new thing. It's been around for a long time, which had become evident while reading the article. Members of the U.S. House Armed Services Committee have voted to create a Space Corps. It's a sixth branch of the armed forces for maneuvers beyond the Earth's atmosphere. Now, I would ask, why in the hell do we need that? Why can the Air Force not handle that? Right now, the Air Force already has a miniature version of the space shuttle, and yes, they did scrap the space program, which was questionable, of why in the world would they do that. But now, here we are, we don't have a space program. We do not have a colony on the moon. We have no way to even get there and back that is admitted. We're not on Mars. We don't have a colony on Mars. Why in the hell would we need a space corps? It kind of makes you question significantly whether or not some of the so-called conspiracy theories may actually have an amount of truth to them. People for years have been claiming that the government's been making a fleet of ships that are far beyond the technology that they show. That would be the only reason that you might actually need this Space Corps. The Space Corps has yet to gain full approval. It would absorb all of the Air Force's current space missions, and it would be under the umbrella of the U.S. Space Command, which is out in Denver. It would also make the head of the new service the 8th member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The plan would be implemented possibly by January of 2019. And would be a radical reorganization of the U.S. Air Force. This was actually signed, apparently by Trump. Several members of the Congressional Committee claimed to have been blindsided by the proposal, attempting to slow down the changes until they heard testimony from the U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis. The challenge was later dropped. Mike Turner from Ohio says that he only learned about the proposal last week when it first came before the Subcommittee on Strategic Forces. He's quoted as saying, "I chastised my staff and said, how could I not know that this was happening? And they said, well, they had a meeting about it and you missed it." Turner said, "A meeting is certainly not enough. Maybe we do need a Space Corps, but I think it bears more than just a discussion in a subcommittee," which is a reasonable thing. We have not had Secretary Mattis come before us and tell us what this means. We have not heard from the Secretary of the Air Force. There's a whole lot of work we need before we go as far as creating a new service branch. Turner's Republican colleague Mike Rogers from Alabama argued that the plan had actually been in development since the publication of the Rumsfeld Commission report, which outlined future U.S. space strategy all the way back in 2001. So now, I'm sure everybody's like thinking, oh, this is a big new thing. And what this guy's saying is, no, this isn't a new thing. They've been working on it for 16 years. This is the first I've heard of it. I've never heard of this before. I've never heard anybody say that they were working on it. I've heard some people with inside tracks claim that the government had been working on fleets of ships that could do things that people would find hard to believe, but nothing substantial like this, and what this guy's saying is that, this is out of the Rumsfeld report back in 2001. Under the plan, all operations, including the Air Force's secretive X-37B plane, would fall under the control of the U.S. Space Corps. The X-37B, which looks like a small space shuttle orbiter, is due to launch again in August after its last flight lasted a record 718 days. That thing is not manned, by the way. It is robotic. And as you can see here, it's a little miniature version looking thing of the space shuttle. It also looks a hell of a lot like the ship that was on the old Buck Rogers TV show intro, which is kind of funny. If you go back and you pull it up, not in the show itself, but in the introduction, it looks like the little ship that he flew. That ship, although they didn't unveil it to the masses until the space shuttle program was about to be scrapped, that thing's actually been around a really long time. And if you pull up some JPEGs of it and take a look at the damage and the wear and tear on the vehicle, you'll see that thing was around a long time before they told anybody about it, which is typical and understandable. The government typically keeps themselves at least 10 years ahead technology-wise, if not more. And, they have a need to do that for national security. Anybody that doesn't think that they are doing that is foolish and not being realistic. Living like an ostrich with your head in the sand. The Space Corps would be the first new military service since 1947, and it is not specifically banned by the Outer Space Treaty, which was a 1967 international agreement outlawing the use of the moon or other celestial bodies from being used as military outposts. So, as long as they're not making a military outpost on the moon or Mars or someplace else, they would not be in violation of that treaty, which is a real thing. It does exist. You can go Google it and look it up if you're not sure. So here they are. They are actually making a move on it and going to make it happen. There's going to be not space marines, but space cadets. If you're in the Air Force, you're a cadet. So the old joke of being a space cadet is now actually going to be a real thing. Why couldn't they have done this 20 years ago? My whole life, all I've wanted to do is be able to join up for something like, the Space Marines or Star Trek or Starship Troopers or some junk like that and go out and see what the heck is out there. Just investigate. Maybe we find nothing. Maybe we find something. God only knows. But anyways, this is a real thing. I will put a link to this story down below. One thing that I do find extremely odd is that I took a look at all the other news sites and nobody's reporting on this in America. There's nothing on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, Fox, none of them. For them, it's a non-story. RT, which some people like to try and disparage, I find that they typically have got more real news that is actually important to people in America than what a lot of the American corporate-owned stations actually do. I find this to be a huge, important thing. I mean, they're talking about creating another branch of the military. And it's crazy because you would think, why would the government think that we need to have a space corps for operations beyond the atmosphere of the Earth when right now the United States allegedly, and by what they admit they have, we don't have any ships that can even do that. Except for this little robot thing from the Air Force, which wouldn't be any good for men that are enrolling, or women, men or women, that are enrolling into the Space Corps. So what do they really have hidden? You know, and you got to start questioning all these stories that maybe you laughed at, that maybe you thought were conspiracy theories, and ask yourself how much of them might actually be true. You know, people have been seeing stuff at Area 51 for, 50 years. There's an area up in Utah with a similar reputation. People that have worked there have come out and, alleged that, things have been reversed engineered, or that we have technology far beyond what is admitted, that we have a limited number of ships that can actually go out and do things that everybody would call UFOs, that if people saw them, they wouldn't think they were ours, but they really are. If those things were true, then it would make more sense that they might actually need a space corps, that they might actually need people to get in these things and go do the job. But then it also makes you wonder, if they scrap the space program and everything else, why do they suddenly feel the need to create a military arm for space? Is there something out there? Something coming that people haven't been told about? I mean, we've all heard, what people label as conspiracy ideas. I mean, everybody's aware of those, so I'm not even going to get into them. But could some of those things possibly be true? Which would be a reason that they would actually take this step. It's just food for thought, and it's definitely something to think about. So anyways, I found this to be a very interesting story. I will leave a link below. If you like the stories that you see on here, please donate to the Patreon. There's a link on the YouTube channel. And please remember to hit subscribe and to like the video. You folks have